Welcome, everyone. Happy Transport Planning Day. I'm sure it's been marked on your calendar for a number of months. It's absolutely fantastic to welcome you all here today and to lots of you online as well. I'm Nicola. I'm the new chair of the Transport Planning Society. I took over from Ben Plowden in the summer, and I'm really excited to be leading the society through its next period of evolution. And the board's been working really hard on a whole load of initiatives for next year. So I hope you'll be seeing a really exciting programme of activities for 2026. Thank you to everyone who's made the effort to come here to London today. Thank you to everyone who's joined us online. We're delighted to be celebrating Transport Planning Day with you all. Hopefully all of you are aware of the Transport Planning Society, but for those of you who don't know, we're the only professional body that focuses entirely on transport planning in the UK, and we represent the views of around 1,400 members and 65 partner organisations that are part of TPS's corporate members. How many of you in the room are members? So quick. Brilliant. I'll get some forms ready for those of you who didn't put your hands up. And if you aren't a member, I'd really encourage you to join because the more members we have, the more activities we can run. And we'd also really encourage you, if your organisation isn't a member of TPS, we've relaunched our partnership programme this year. If you're part of a public sector organisation, you can join for free. So hopefully that's an absolute no-brainer. And we have a number of different options for those of you working in the private sector. So do get involved. And maybe next year you could be sponsoring our Transport Planning Day events in 2026. So every year we run the Transport Planning Day campaign to raise awareness of the role that transport planning has on improving everybody's lives and to showcase examples of best practice from across the profession. And this year we wanted to focus on the topic of the integration imperative. How can we make a reality of connecting policy, places and people? And this was really inspired by the DfT launching its national conversation last year around a new integrated national transport strategy. And I think as all of we know in the room, integration is no longer a distant ambition, it's really a necessity. And whether that's about coordinating better between transport modes, aligning transport policy with spatial planning and climate goals, aligning national and local network planning. A truly integrated transport system is key to unlocking growth, shaping better environmental and social outcomes, and enhancing people's travel experience. So it's absolutely fundamental to all aspects of what we do as transport planners. And we really want to use Transport Planning Day to showcase a whole range of different examples of how integration is being done well right across the nations and across the globe as well, and learning also from what hasn't worked and how we can build on that in future and not make the same mistakes. So with the call for ideas now closed, we're excited to see what's in the new integrated national transport strategy. But in the meantime, through our transport planning activities today and right across the country over the next few days, do look out for all our regional events. We've got lots happening right across the country. We're going to be exploring a whole range of issues from integration between different central and local government departments, particularly in respect to growth, decarbonisation, land use and transport planning, alignment of public and private sector funding to deliver greater impact, innovation on how we can integrate and better improve accessibility to transport for people from all walks of life, and ensuring that transport planners have the right skills, capacity and collaborative capability to work with each other to deliver a more integrated network. So before I introduce our fantastic panel for the first session, I wanted to let you know we'll have a Q&A session straight after this. So love to have lots of questions in the room. We'll also be taking questions from people watching online. So do get those questions ready, make a note of them, get ready to ask them. I'd also love to thank our sponsors. They're up there on the screen. We've had support today from Jacobs, Traxis, Stantec, IDASO, Kestrel Surveys, Velocity, Believe, Advanced Transport Research and Charge Surveys. So thank you all for making today possible. And we'd also encourage everyone to share your thoughts on the event today online. If you could use the hashtag TPDay2025, we'd love to hear your comments through the session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. We've got Ruth Cadbury MP, who's the chair of the Transport Select Committee. We're also joined by Vernon Everett, the Transport Commissioner for Greater Manchester and chair of Transport for Wales, and then we'll hear from Andrew Summers, who's the Chief Executive of Transport for the East. So I'll hand straight over to you, Ruth. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and it's a huge pleasure to be speaking to the Transport Planning Society today. You as transport planners really do link the vision with the reality and the delivery that makes our country, our cities, our towns, our villages better places to live and work. And so far as I'm concerned, transport is a means to an end, not an end in itself. And that I'll take that in a number of different ways. So I'll just say a little bit about myself. For 10 years, I've been the elected Labour MP in Brentford and Isleworth Borough of Hounslow in West London. I am a planner. I worked for Planning Aid for London and for a short while for Richmond Council. I was a councillor for 25 years and chaired the planning committee and was cabinet member for traffic, transport and environment and regeneration and so on. And since I've been in Parliament, I've been on transport committee, Justice Committee, but also, and Women and Equalities Committee, but also been a shadow housing and a shadow planning minister before the election. And I was elected from across the House of Commons as the chair of the Transport Select Committee in September last year. I can't be reshuffled very easily, unlike ministers. And for those who don't know, select committees, particularly the departmental select committees, hold the government to account. So we hold the Secretary of State for Transport and her ministers to account, also DfT agencies and transport providers to account in public. Some of you, I know, have been witnesses at our sessions. Our sessions are on the public record. So are our reports, our recommendations, the government's response to our recommendations, and a large number of correspondence between myself on behalf of the committee and government agencies, etc. So it's that transparency. And although it may not sound as if not being a minister is a shame, actually several people, including some quite powerful people, have said that select committees and select committee chairs often have more power than ministers. We're not given the credit, of course, but I can cope with that. And a piece of work that the Institute for Government did a few years ago, they clocked all of the recommendations. All of our reports have a series of recommendations, and this isn't just our committee, but of recommendations that were not supported by government in their initial response, a large number of them were adopted by government down the line. So you could say that, I'd say we do have some influence, and it's interesting how many people in the transport sector, public and private sector, saying, I really like what your report said about, or you'll notice that what you said a couple of years ago, that's when I was on Transport Committee before, has now been adopted. And it's like, which is very, very satisfying. Some of the reports that we've done, the first report we published was Access Denied, which actually worked done in the previous Parliament by the committee, the rights versus reality for people with disabilities in the transport sector. And that wasn't just about the dimensions of steps or the width of doorways, but was much more about how the systems and the people part of the systems often didn't make life easy. In fact, made life very, very difficult for people with disabilities. Some of that has been picked up in the rail bill, and we will be pushing that quite significantly. But it's what I would like to see is that disabled people don't have to fight and don't have to feel that they are the problem every time they raise an issue of their experience in public transport. We did a report on street works because, and all of these were generated by MPs saying, this is what matters to my constituents, weren't just picked up out of thin air. So street works, how can we reduce the delays caused by utilities digging up our roads? Buses connecting communities was based on the demise of bus services outside Greater London, where I represent, but also the centre of the very large cities. I'll come back to that actually, because that's an issue I feel very strongly about, and I would like to see the government doing a lot more around buses, particularly in suburban areas, peri-urban areas, and rural areas. To come, we've got a report that'll be out in a month or so on boom and bust in the rail, in rail investment pipelines. We've also had a number of one-off sessions. We've got a third session with the Secretary of State for Transport on Wednesday morning. And I think that'll be televised on BBC Parliament. You can also see it on Parliament Live TV. We've had sessions really pushing the DVSC on driving licenses. If you know anybody or you've tried to get a driving test, you'll know what a mess that is, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. On Heathrow, the runway 3 proposal, and also on the substation fire that closed Heathrow Airport. And other sessions. We're in the middle of a piece of work on taxis and private hire vehicles. We'll be doing work on the rail reform bill. We're doing an inquiry now on manufacturing skills, in transport manufacturing skills, on the Ports National Policy Statement. We'll have the Heathrow Runway 3 National Policy Statement coming to us. I would imagine, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year we may well do work on active travel. We may do work on EVs. That's just a hunch. That's not an official announcement, by the way. So, some thoughts on where I think we are with the new government, Labour government, a radically different approach politically, top-level politics around the role of transport, the role of modal shift, the role of net zero, and a way to what transport should be a way to rebalance our very north-south uneven economy. Equality, I think, is really, really important. I chaired the all-party parliamentary group on women in transport for a number of years. And I'll carry on down that thread. So most of us either, I guess, live in London or a major city and or can drive or have access to a car. 40% of people in England do not have access to a private car. And where there is no bus service and no train service, you're stuck. You're dependent, and if it's too far to cycle anywhere or you can't cycle, you really are stuck. And I'm very conscious of that, living in and having the benefit of TfL's public transport network. And I just really think this is a massive equalities issue for young people trying to get a job, trying to get to college, older people or people with any kind of disability that means they can't drive. They're dependent on lifts from neighbours, on unreliable, uneven, infrequent bus services, or none at all. And I just think that should be a much bigger issue in our public narrative. And I'm just, I'm going to do my bit to try and do something about that. I think road safety is an increasing issue for members of Parliament and for Labour members, well, for a lot of people, the inequality of who is more likely to die or be seriously injured. Children in urban areas, particularly those areas of low deprivation, but also young people frankly killing themselves or others on rural roads. And the UK used to be a world leader on road safety, and we've been flatlining, and other nations, equivalent economies, are catching up and overtake and look like could be overtaking the UK in terms of road safety, and net zero. And I am a little bit frustrated that we have a legal commitment as a country to decarbonise our economy, but I'm not seeing that level of commitment from government. And it's a bit of a mixed picture, shall I say. And there don't seem to be any targets for it. I spent 2.5 days in Switzerland last week, and the whole transport policy starts from decarbonisation, equality and environment, and affordability. And there's the whole series of laws and transport provision that stems out from that. They are investing massively in rail infrastructure, and they even have a national constitutional target to not increase the amount of road freight on their roads. I want to move on to a couple of other challenges. One that's sort of linked to my frustration about investment, that I would like to see our investment in infrastructure to be based on overall growth benefits and not just a very simple costs out sum, or can we get some money for this out of the Treasury, and that's where the money's going to come from. More on land value capture and so on. And we'd only have to look at the success of the Elizabeth line across London, the Northumberland line in Northumberland, to see what other benefits have come from those schemes. Passenger usage way above what was predicted, new jobs, new developments, land values rising, and I think we could do more to capture that. And there's some work to be done, I think, on how we charge, how the taxation charge incentivizes different forms of transport, and certainly further move towards EVs. I think we've got a real challenge in this country, and this is across all sectors, not just transport, on skills, and the transition from school into career via different forms of training and apprenticeship. I say, being in Switzerland last week, we learned that sort of inherent cultural difference in Switzerland that we in the UK could learn so much for. I think I'll sort of end on some politics, and some of this is of small p politics, but I do worry about, in the UK, there's a nervousness in words like what can be interpreted by changing travel behaviour. And as a local politician, as well as I suppose a national one, I think we have to be very careful, and I think you probably, those of you working for local authorities know this, about how you frame getting changing ways of doing things. Put the change in place, and they will make the city a better place, and behaviours change. And good examples of that is low traffic in neighbourhoods. I think they work in places they wanted, and I see Mark Frost at the back, the last but one chair of the planning. Transport Planning Society. I remember when he was a very young transport planner in the London Borough of Hounslow. We had a real challenge in South Chiswick. The councillors there were Conservatives. They really wanted to stop the rat running through Chiswick. In fact, the Boris Johnson COVID scheme actually gave Hounslow the funding and the powers to put in an experimental low traffic neighbourhood. It really made a massive improvement to quality of life there, and the work that was embedded in, and some tweaks around the edges, but it's still fundamentally there. And I believe that's why Labour remarkably won one seat in the elections 3.5 years ago in Chiswick, which was sort of hadn't happened for almost 50 years. And I think I've said a bit about buses. As part of our buses inquiry, we went to Ireland and looked at rural buses in Ireland. The Greens, who were in coalition in Ireland, had a place on the cabinet, I think it is, but powerful place in government. They instituted a policy that has been rolled out now. Every community, virtually across the whole of Ireland, has to be linked to the nearest small town or large town by at least 3 return buses per day. It's starting to see modal shift. We don't quite have figures on that, but it's hugely popular. And the Greens are no longer in power, but I can't imagine any government now or into the future in Ireland is going to reverse that policy. It's making some of the people from some of the towns and large villages said that growth was coming back. Prosperity was coming back to their centres because people who were previously, particularly older people, stuck at home, could come in now and do their weekly shop, spend money, see friends, and a coffee bar and that sort of thing. So, we've got to be positive to provide positive alternatives to owning or driving a car for all our journeys. And we had a very interesting session with the colleagues who run the whole sector of car clubs, ride sharing, pool cars. Shifting our holiday travel from aviation to rail. I think we've got some possibilities there with using that unused capacity on High Speed 1 over to the tunnel. But also I see the variety in terms of public narrative. Now, again in Hounslow and in London, I never saw any pushback on bus lanes. Lots of pushback in social media about segregated cycle paths, but nobody suggested pushing back and saying no to bus lanes. Whereas I think in other places, Liverpool, a lot of controversy. Somebody nodding. And again, I don't know about school streets, but certainly there are at least 30 school streets in Hounslow Borough now. Not a squeak of opposition around them, and head teachers saying a lot more children, a lot more families are walking to school now and spending time with their children and having a walk before school. So these things don't happen quickly or suddenly. And when we think of the Netherlands as a place of very high levels of public transport usage and walking and cycling, but they were very much a car-centred nation until about the mid-70s. A combination of the fuel price rise, but also a lot of child deaths. A campaign started in Utrecht among parents, campaigning against child deaths on the roads, and that started a change in policy. So I think we're a fair way along. There's a lot of good rhetoric, a lot of good people working in the sector, but I think we still got quite a long way to go. And I hope that we in the Transport Committee are playing our part in moving the debate along. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. Fantastic to hear about the hugely varied work programme that you're overseeing at the Transport Select Committee. And I think particularly encouraging to hear the emphasis on equality and decarbonisation. There's been a huge amount of focus on growth, but I think it's really important that we don't overlook those 2 important aspects of what we do. So thank you very much. So I'd like to hand over next to Vernon Everett, who's the Transport Commissioner for Greater Manchester and the Chair of Transport for Wales. And I think, Vernon, you're going to be talking about the Greater Manchester Bee Network. So welcome.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Joe, for inviting me along. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, so the purpose today really to talk about the integration imperative, and I'd like to sort of illustrate how that's coming together in Greater Manchester and also in Wales as well. And actually, as I run through this brief presentation, This could be a story being told by any of the combined authorities or devolved countries in this country. And increasingly, I was just talking to Andrew about what's happening in the East. More mayoralties are being created, and there'll be more impetus for greater integration. So I think this is a similar story as could be told from Liverpool or West Yorkshire or anywhere else, actually. So just to echo Ruth, I think it all starts from a realisation that transport is not an end in itself. It is about policy, people and places, which I think is the subtitle for the session today. And it's an enabler of everything else, and we're seeing it work. We are seeing economic growth outside of the southeast running at a faster rate. In Greater Manchester is the fastest growing part of the country in terms of its growth. It's about narrowing the still yawning gap that there is in productivity between the north of the country and the south, and in countries like Wales compared with London and the southeast. It is about access to all of the other policy objectives that our local politicians are seeking to deliver around access to homes, jobs, education, public services, and just broader opportunity, just the opportunity to live a better life. And it's about better health outcomes as well. And I work very closely with Dame Sarah Story, who's the Active Travel Commissioner in Greater Manchester, to ensure that the public transport element and the active travel element really come together as a coherent whole. And of course, it's all about helping businesses flourish as well. So I guess if there were three things that I would say in the context of today's heading, it's to urge everybody to always remember the wider purpose of transport, and that it isn't an end in itself. Always put people and place at the centre of everything rather than transport technicality. You're all experts in what it is that you do, and there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into producing the sorts of results that Ruth was describing. The main thing, though, is not to disappear so far down that rabbit hole that we forget about the fact that we're serving people and places. And the third thing is that political devolution is at the core of driving all of this forward. It is at the core of getting on with it. I happen to have a mayor who gets all of this and, you know, wants everything changed a fortnight last Thursday. And that's great. So that political impetus, that's what changed the game in London when, through the GLA Act and the creation of Transport for London in the year 2000, and having a mayor, single point of political accountability, there was only one place to complain to, one place to look at. Suddenly, that changed the game. What also changed the game, and is in fact changing the game in the regions, is funding. We've all got, particularly the big combined authorities, have all got Transport for City Region Fund settlements, and as well as raising money locally. So there's actually money to get on with things. It's never enough, but it's enough to start going and to demonstrate benefits from improving transport and delivering better integration. We're also on the cusp, I hope, of seeing 3-year funding settlements for bus revenue. We've been promised that from the current government, and that is an absolute game changer. As everybody here knows, you need steady and sustained funding, over a period of years to engender this change. And that needs to apply both to capital and to revenue. So the B network, it was really dead easy. We just painted everything yellow. The B network is part of the Greater Manchester strategy. And again, taking the learnings from London, transport is locked up with economic development, social development, spatial development within the city region of getting on for over 3 million people now. And in Wales, if you start putting the populations of North Wales together with Liverpool city region, with what's happening in Cheshire and Warrington, who get a mayor the year after next. With Manchester, you have an economic footprint there, 2/3 of the size of London. And those mayors working together, again, taking integration and connectivity as core enablers of everything else they want to do, is extraordinarily powerful. And the money that's coming in is helping that. In Greater Manchester, so we're doing two things at once, I guess. We're sorting out our own backyards, and the B network is the Greater Manchester version of that. But we're also thinking about that across boundary connectivity, including into North Wales and out to Holyhead, where there are huge and very significant industrial complexes, commercial developments, and so on. Anyway, in Greater Manchester, we are joining up bus, tram, rail. We had an announcement a couple of days ago, it was last week, GBR, Shadow GBR, making the first steps to simplify rail fares in Greater Manchester as a prelude to expanding the tap and go integrated system we already have between trams and buses to include suburban rail as well. And the first sort of really joined up multimodal travel will be happening in Greater Manchester next year. So that's really, really promising, and all joined up by integrated fares and ticketing. So they're the core ingredients really to integration. Getting there is hard. There's all sorts of different organisations you need to form partnerships with, and there isn't a one-stop shop to go and engage on all of this. So it's hard yards, but it's well worth doing. Bus franchising, incidentally, in Greater Manchester is the first region to go for it after well, we've done it, and we've now had the passage of the bus bill, which I'm sure will encourage many others, and many others of the big CAs are now looking at it or out for consultation. That of itself isn't an end in itself. That is a means of integration. You cannot integrate all the different modes of transport unless you have control over the planning and the fares. So if integration is the thing that you think is going to drive the local economy and narrow the productivity gap and deliver all the sorts of benefits we want to deliver our citizens, you need to own the fare box of the bus network. There are other models. Franchising is not for everyone. And again, Andrew and I were just sort of musing about this earlier on. Some of the smaller local authorities won't want to do it. But again, with the creation of more mayoralties and more connectivity across boundaries, I think there's ample scope for greater partnership across boundaries as well that can start to bring benefits to people that don't necessarily want to go it alone. In Greater Manchester, big slabs of it are rural. If you go to Oldham and Rochdale, you're in the countryside very quickly. There's a role for cars in all of this. It isn't just about public transport and active travel. And in Wales, those of you that visited Wales will know that most of the country is in fact rural. So it has to accommodate all of this stuff as well. Anyway, we're getting on with bus franchising in Wales as well. It's worth remembering in all the debate about franchising what the commercial model had actually delivered outside of London. London was never deregulated, was it? So we had a 38% reduction in bus services between 1977 and 2022. To have a single bus journey in Greater Manchester until a couple of years ago was £4.50. It's £1.75 in London, and we've now got it down to £2 in Manchester. Without reform of the buses, the ambitions, the really ambitious agendas of the combined authorities simply cannot be delivered. It's essential, as I mentioned, to integrating modes because you need to join up the buses with the trams, with the trains into a coherent whole so that they deliver for the people that use us. But it isn't right for everybody. We have got some really fantastic results. We started franchising. We did it in 3 goes in Greater Manchester, started in September 23, finished in January this year. I think it was January this year. We've seen punctuality go from around 65% to 80%. in that time. Annual ridership growth in the first tranche area is 12% year on year and 14% in the second tranche. And we're well on the way to delivering our target of having 30% more bus travel by 2030. There are literally millions more journeys. We've improved 75 of the routes already in Greater Manchester by adding more frequency. We've introduced night bus services in the north of Greater Manchester. Never had night buses before in the north of Greater Manchester. There were some in the south, but we've now got a night bus network. And many of these routes are now turn up and go or virtually turn up and go. We've got a quarter of the fleet now zero emission, and by 2030, the whole lot will be zero emission. And 75% of the buses that are actually on the roads now are less than 5 years old. Fares, as I mentioned, reduced by over 15% to £2, revenues ahead of forecast. And we're now really seeking to consolidate that positive picture. The cost per kilometre of operating the bus network is a third lower under the franchise arrangements than it was with us intervening to prop up commercial operators' routes, which were deemed essential. So authorities, and this is happening in Wales all the time, are having to step in to stop communities being severed. And so we were buying the routes anyway, and it's actually cheaper under the franchise model. We're also unlocking thousands of homes and commercial developments. And anyone that hasn't visited Stockport recently, just hop off the train at Stockport, go into the interchange and see all of the development that's around there. The housing development, you no longer take your life in your hands to cross the A6 to get into the town centre. You can pass under the road. It's just opened out the whole area. And it's what good looks like. Alongside all of that, loads of customer experience improvements have delivered both in Greater Manchester and in Wales. There are new apps with the location of buses and generally better information, and taking a leaf out of London's book, travel demand management for big events. We've introduced travel safe officers across Greater Manchester to provide greater confidence and visible reassurance around the network that people are in control. Tap and Go has been introduced, and 54% of adult bus journeys now are tap and go. We only introduced it in March. We've got a hopper as well. Rail fare simplification is underway, as I mentioned. Tap and Go on rail coming next year. It's already in place in Wales. It's the first area outside of London to have genuinely integrated rail fares, tap and go rail fares outside London and the South East. We've had a huge focus on the safety of women and girls and introduced a new live chat facility in Greater Manchester. And Greater Manchester Police, there are 10 boroughs in Greater Manchester. They now police the transport network as the 11th borough. And it's brought a whole new way of thinking and integration within the police themselves about how the network is policed to make people actually and feel safer. So there's all of that. There's much more to come. We've got plans for more on the rail side of things, and we haven't even touched on the big infrastructure investment of the Liverpool-Manchester Railway, Northern Powerhouse Rail, the plans that we've got for extending the Metrolink network in Greater Manchester to really amp up our rapid transit capability. None of that's been easy. There's been legal challenges, there's been teething problems, there's been bedding in problems, there's establishing a team, there's finding people in boroughs with whom you can really do business with. Boroughs have been hollowed out, and we've needed to find ways to assist the boroughs to get stuff done, including all the school street stuff and all of the active travel stuff in particular. And running the buses has really brought into sharp relief the need to manage the highways networks across the country very, very differently. So in conclusion, integration of transport and a focus on people, policy and places has to be at the heart of delivering all of the outcomes that you're working on and that the people you work for are working on, and what politicians are promising their electorates. It's about growth, it's about better lives, and it's about narrowing that productivity gap. Integration isn't for the faint-hearted, but if growth and productivity and better lives are the objective, then there is no alternative to it. And I think, just to repeat, the three key ingredients to getting all of that done is to always remember that wider purpose, that transport isn't an end in itself. Put people and place in front of everything, and always remember that, even when we're consumed in the understandable transport technicality of getting a lot of this stuff done, and that political devolution and the fiscal devolution is absolutely core to delivering those improvements. Hope you have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Vernon. That's fantastic. And you joked about just painting everything yellow. But as someone who lives and works in Greater Manchester, that visual cue of having all of the motor transport painted yellow and with the B symbol on is massively symbolic, isn't it? And really sort of communicates the integration of the network. So thank you very much for that. That's brilliant. Okay, last but not least, we've got Andy Summers, who's the Chief Executive of Transport East, the subnational transport body for Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Southend and Thurrock. And he's going to talk a bit about the challenges and opportunities of delivering an integrated transport network in a slightly more rural geography. Over to you, Andy.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. As Nicola said, I'm Andrew Summers. I lead Transport East. We're a partnership of 29 local authorities and businesses across the East, from North Norfolk by the Wash, all the way down to Thurrock and Southend on the Thames. So a really diverse region. And I think what I'm going to do today is provide a bit of a case study of integration in what is quite a unique region for the UK. Now, our partnership has worked together really closely over the last 4 to 5 years to create an evidence base for transport. We've agreed a pan-regional transport strategy. We've identified investment priorities that support our political leaders to really make the case for transport investment. And in terms of the theme of devolution, we're at a really exciting stage in the East. At the minute, we have no devolution, but by May next year, the entirety of our geography will be covered by mayors. So 2 new mayors, one for Norfolk and Suffolk, and one for Greater Essex. And what we want to make sure is that we use the powers that those mayors have, and hopefully the funding, to really unlock the East's potential. So over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk through 4 key points. Firstly, the East's economic offer to the UK. Secondly, set out our partners' collective transport strategy that enables that offer. Thirdly, what the challenges are. And finally, what the opportunities are that we can hope to see over the next year or two as devolution unfolds. So I'm just going to start off with, as both Ruth and Vernon have said, transport is an enabler. And each part of England has a very different story here. And it's why devolution based on places and people is so important. And so, like most other places, the East story doesn't start with transport at all. And I don't really need to mention it in this first slide. But it's transport alongside other themes like skills that are an enabler, but an enabler to what? Now, our region's MPs, our political leaders, our business leaders have done a lot of work over the last couple of years to really articulate to government what is the role of the East in the context of the wider UK? What is it that we provide to support the wider UK economy? And we've really boiled it down to 3 key things. We feed the nation, we power the country, and we trade with the world. And that's our role. So in terms of feeding the nation, we have 1/3 of the Grade 1 arable farmland in England. We also have the future of feeding the nation as well. So we have Europe's premier agri-tech sector. That is a fusion of both our natural assets in terms of that farmland, but as well as the academia, so Cambridge University, UEA. And in Norwich Business Park, we've got the #1 site for agriculture going forwards. And that's going to be really important in terms of supporting the country going forwards. It's one of the many industrial sectors we have, but also increasingly vital for national security, which we're seeing increasingly through conversations as coming up as a really key aspect that we as transport planners need to take account of. The second part is powering the UK. So by 2035, electricity generated in the East will be able to power 90% of UK homes. So we have Europe's premier wind farm just off our coast, and Sizewell C is now under construction in Suffolk. That in itself will require a temporary town of 10,000 people living there in what is currently a rural area. So huge transport implications of that. We also have within Norfolk and Suffolk more NSIPs than any other counties across England, and that is a large amount of solar farms that we have there. So in terms of powering the UK, a huge contribution that we're going to be making in the East to the future of the UK's energy security. And then the third aspects that our political leaders have been voicing to Treasury and others is our role in trading with the world. So we've got 13 ports along our coast. Over half of the UK's freight containers come through those ports, serving the rest of the country. And I just wanted to do a quick sort of hands up experiment now. Who has a smartphone with them today? So pretty much all of you. The chances are that's come through Felixstowe Port. Who here writes on paper? Brilliant. So most of that probably came through Tilbury. So 50 acres of Tilbury Port is devoted to handling 1 million tonnes of paper annually. So most of the paper and forest goods that you use come through Tilbury Port. Third one, and a little bit more niche here. Who eats berries in the winter? Excellent. So not all of you, but most of you. They probably came from Morocco or Egypt, but they also probably came in through the east of England. So in Thames ports, we've got 14,000 refrigerator container docking points that is vital for those berries to then find their way to your plate. So I think what we've established here is that everyone here relies on the East's ability to trade with the world. And the point here is that the East is vital for UK industrial strategy and increasingly national security and defence. But it's not only that national role, it's a major local imperative as well, which is where the sort of the fourth picture here comes in. Over 500,000 new homes are projected to be built in the east of England between now and 2050. So absolutely vital to supporting the government's growth targets. The people that already live in the region, that visit the region and will live in the region in the future will require a high quality of life. They want health outcomes, social inclusion outcomes. So it's imperative that the region's big ambitions don't happen unless we get the supporting systems right at both a national but also a local transport level as well. So I think we're very clear there on what are the outcomes that we want to see and how does transport therefore enable those. And this is where we really need to have a good integrated transport network. And as I said earlier, the East is quite unique. It doesn't have a large metropolitan area. It actually has about 75 large to medium-sized towns and cities. It's polycentric, and it's the movement within those and between them that actually drives the economy. In the East, we collaborate across all levels, so 29 local authorities, planning authorities and districts. We've got well-developed local transport plans and local plans for planning. And at a pan-regional level, all of those 29 partners have agreed across the 4 Transport East strategic priorities. So in terms of regional transport integration, these are the 4 things that we're absolutely focused on. So firstly, decarbonisation to net zero. As we developed our transport strategy and we went out for public consultation, it was really clear that partners and the public saw this as really important. And indeed, in the East, 42% of all emissions come from transport, which is the highest of any other region in the UK. That's largely because of the amount of rural transports we have and also the significant amount of freight that also flows through our region. So our strategy has a pathway that really focuses on reducing the need to travel, shifting modes, and also shifting fuels where possible. The second layer of our strategy is connecting our growing towns and cities. As I said, the economy works by movement between those towns and cities. The people that live here want to access skills, jobs and services, and we're also marketing ourselves to investors in the UK as a world-class region. And interestingly, speaking to the free ports and the inward investment teams within local authorities, the number one question that those investors are asking us is, what does your sustainable transport network look like, both for people and moving freight? So it's imperative that we really focus on that sustainable connectivity. The top photo there on the diagram on the slide was taken last week at Booley Park Station, which was the first station on the Great Eastern Main Line to open in 100 years. And this is all about sustainable connectivity. So that station, just outside of it, is a new housing site with 10,000 homes. And what it allows for is integrated transport within the Chelmsford area. So alongside that station, there's 500 new cycle parking spaces and direct guided bus into the middle of Chelmsford. So integrated transport is live and kicking in the East and absolutely fundamental to the way forwards. The third area here is energising rural and coastal communities. So 1 in 3 people in the East live in rural areas and 1 in 5 on the coast. And there's some really concerning statistics that we have related to that. So one in 4 of those people live in communities with transport-related social exclusion. That is, they can't access skills, education, training by any means, and it's really holding them back in terms of their life provision. Within Transport East, we did a survey which we published a few months ago. We interviewed 1,000 young people across the east of England, and we asked them about their travel. And it was really clear that they're facing significant issues around the cost of transport and the accessibility into places like Norwich, Ipswich and Chelmsford to be able to develop their skills to then go on to get good jobs. So one of the things we've done at Transport East is create the Rural Mobility Centre of Excellence. We're working really closely with government and other partners to really drive forward the needs of people that live in rural areas. And then the fourth layer to our transport strategy, as I've already talked about, is making sure that we access freight, enable it to get from our ports and our airports to places like Birmingham, Manchester and London, so you can get your iPhones, your paper and your berries as well. But seriously, the amount of freight that flows through our region has to be managed and moved to rail where possible. And hopefully all of you have seen our recent campaign on Ely Junction. In our view, the number one transport priority in the whole of the east of England is unlocking a bottleneck around Ely, which will allow more freight to get from Felixstowe to places like industry in the Midlands, the north. It really unlocks the rail network, and hopefully you've seen our campaign about that. It's the number one thing that the east has been talking to government about. So hopefully that provides a bit of context around why we need to develop an integrated transport network. I'm just going to move on to our third slide here, third point around the conditions for integration. From a strategic perspective, our spending review evidence base set out a number of conditions that we need to address to really enable integration locally and transformation regionally. When we submitted this to Treasury back in February, we asked for 5 key things that we need to unlock integration and unlock these outcomes in the East. The first one was long-term integrated funding certainty. For a number of decades now, our local authorities have had very short-term funding, grant funding on a silo basis. This has not allowed them to develop more of a portfolio or program approach to transport investment over the longer term. And one of the key things that we were asking Treasury for is that long-term investment, that certainty to allow both them to invest, but also to attract a lot of the private sector investment that is there, but needs a bit of certainty from the public sector side. We also asked for equity of funding, so making sure that, I guess, the good benefits that the Midlands and the North have been getting in terms of that longer term integrated settlements, spread those benefits as well to places like the East. The third key area is around capacity and capability of local authorities. I came to Transport East from Transport for London, and it was a completely different environment in terms of capacity and capability. In the East, those local authorities do not have a lot of funding, a lot of big teams to be able to really develop that pipeline of investment going forwards. And one of the key things we've been asking government for is, can we have that capacity and capability within places like the East to really have that firepower to drive forward some of these integrated transport measures? The fourth area that we've been very clear to government is reduce the risk of investment. So a lot of the risk needed for that infrastructure pipeline falls to local authorities. And not only that, before they get the capital surety, it's often resource funding. So one of the things we've been saying to government is we need to share the risk with you in terms of that infrastructure investment. Can you make sure that you're providing a lot more risk mitigation upfront so our local authorities can take forward some of those schemes? And then fifth, the East of England is the lowest lying area in the UK. Resilience, maintenance and climate change adaptation is really important for us in terms of the security of our future transport network. So we want to see particular emphasis paid to that. So there are 5 key things there that we were really keen for Treasury and DfT to help us take forward, and we hope that devolution will help us unlock that. I've also set out some of the investment priorities that we set out in that spending review. A lot of them are around strategic rail. The diagram or the picture on the right-hand side there is a recent event that we held at Newmarket to really push the case for the eastern section of East West Rail. So a lot of you will know that once the missing link between Cambridge and Bletchley is in, we will then have coast-to-coast connectivity between the East Coast and Bristol on the west. What we want to see is within the eastern section of that, as much access to that rail line as possible through sustainable means, so we can really maximise the benefits of that. In the short term, there's a lot of quick wins we can do based on the existing capacity, and just relies on the willpower of DfT, Treasury and the local train operators to be able to unlock that through increased frequency. So really see a pathway here for sustainable transport going forwards. So I'm just going to go to my final slide here about what's the opportunity, and it really is an exciting time in the east of England. The levers of integration are all coming at once. So all of those 29 local authorities in our partnership are on the government's priority devolution priority programme at the same time. Now, this is going to happen very quickly. We're going from no devolution in the east now to full-scale devolution and local government reform in about 2.5 years. So just think about the scale of change there. We're going to have 2 new mayors and between 5 to 11 new unitary authorities, depending on which of the current proposals that MHCLG will take forward. Those mayors over time will have new powers. The bus services bill gives them potential powers over franchising. Planning and infrastructure bill allows for full integration through spatial development strategies. But as Vernon said earlier on, absolutely fundamental within that is fiscal devolution as well. And this is not going to work unless that fiscal devolution follows that powers devolution. There are other things happening at the same time that allow us to really capitalise on integration. So within the East, our train operating companies have been the first to go back into public ownership. So there are 3 train operating companies that were in the first wave. 2 of them, Greater Anglia and C2C, comprise the entirety of the East's rail network. Greater Anglia went in a few weeks ago and then C2C in the summer. What is now happening, they're merging with Network Rail and creating, in a couple of weeks' time, to be stood up, an integrated Anglia Railways unit. And for the first time in the East, for a number of years since rail companies were invented many years ago, we're going to have track and operations integrated into one body. And that's a fantastic step forward for integration. Alongside the powers that the mayors are going to be getting, we're starting to see consolidation of what was a fragmented system into something that's really coherent and integrated going forwards. At a national level, the National Infrastructure Services and Transformation Authority has developed its 10-year strategy and infrastructure pipeline. Looking at things over a 10-year timescale allows us to plan ahead, that long-term certainty I was talking about earlier. Within that pipeline already is Sizewell C and the Lower Thames Crossing, which are absolutely sort of major sort of causes of impact on the Transport East network. And so it's an approach for thinking more long-term about the East's investment needs aligned to what is that national infrastructure investment. And as a result of all of that, hopefully we'll be able to leverage more in terms of the private sector investment into the region. So the opportunity of devolution, I think, is huge, and I think it will be the game changer. The risk is also significant as well. There's a huge amount of change there within 2.5, 3 years. Not a lot of capacity in the system, and not the sort of the surety of the fiscal devolution straight away as well. So our focus as a local government family is to really harness the benefits and provide a consistent framework for all of that. The role of Transport East going forwards, I think, in the East is a really strong one. We've been working hard with them to ensure that there's a pan-regional framework in the East going forwards. With so much change, there's going to be a need to have that constant force for strategic oversight going forwards. So just going back to the start of the presentation, I think in summary, it's really clear what the East's offer is to UK PLC, but also in terms of what we need to offer to our own residents and visitors. There is a joined up coherent strategy. Our partners have coalesced around that. There's a series of barriers that we have to tackle and primarily fiscal barriers, but there's a huge opportunity coming up through devolution. And I really look forward to working with all partners here, the transport planning industry and beyond, to make that happen. So thank you very much and good to see you.
Thanks, Andrew. It's fantastic. Covered a lot of ground there, but I think there are a few kind of common themes across all three presentations, actually, which is really nice to see. So certainly transport as an enabler and the importance of putting people and places right at the heart of everything we do, I think came through all three speeches today. Devolution is really changing how we deliver, and certainly Greater Manchester is really enabling you to deliver that truly integrated network. So I think we need to all kind of get our heads around as transport planners how devolution is shaping the way that we work and that how decisions are made. Funding and financing, massively critical. Looking at bringing in new opportunities to engage with the private sector, as well as getting greater certainty around public sector funding and maybe being a bit cleverer about how we leverage funding from different government departments, not just transport. And I guess what I heard from a transport planning point of view, capacity, capability, massively important. And hopefully that gives you all confidence as people working in transport planning that we've all got a job for a while longer and we need to keep attracting more people to come into the profession. We are a little bit behind schedule, so I'm just going to give, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 minutes for questions, and then we'll have a bit of a chance to network. So hopefully some of our speakers can stick around and you can have a chat to them over a drink. Right, we've got lots of hands in the room already. Ben, do you want to kick us off?
Thanks, Nicola. Ben Plowden, formerly this parish, now Chief Executive of the Campaign for Better Transport. Ruth, I think this is a question for you. I think everyone in this room would agree, and certainly the mayoral authorities would agree, that transport's fundamental to quality of life. That's been the theme of what you've all said, both every day but also long term. My sense is that's less well understood in central government, and particularly one might argue in the Treasury, no disrespect to people from the Treasury in the room, an adjacent department like MHC or G. So I guess my question to you would be, A, do you think that's true? B, if so, why? And C, what do you think collectively we can do about kind of moving transport up the kind of political agenda so it's alongside the other great departments of state, which at the moment I don't think it is?
Well, I struggle to disagree with you, actually. Yeah, because I think one of the problems with government, and I was in local government and then in Parliament in opposition, is that in the UK, with some honourable exceptions, it's very siloed. And there is a hierarchy of government departments, and transport is not seen as one of the highly important departments. And it saddened me greatly to see in the recent reshuffle, because education needed another minister, and there's a cost. There's a cap on the number of ministers a government can have. And so education lost its education needed another minister, apparently. Fair enough, education is a massive policy issue, but the post we lost was in transport, and I was part of that campaign internally that has enabled Lillian Greenwood to be able to job share. Though the person, Nick Deacon, who did similar whip plus government department in opposition, in the first year of government, he ended up doing 2 full-time jobs, and being a minister is bad enough anyway. So there is that cultural problem, and coming from silos, and there's also this other issue where Treasury sees, particularly nowadays, sees everything in pound signs. And I think that may be different in other equivalent economies. It costs money to put in a new rail line, expand the Ely-Hawley junction, which is something that I do just about understand, but I keep banging on about it as well whenever I get the chance. And why I do think we also need to be a bit more radical about the funding options in a way that other countries have done, to show the benefits as well as and like much government policy, the disbenefits, the cost in pound signs of the social cost of inadequate public transport, poor housing, etc., etc.
Thank you. Yep, in the middle of the room there.
Mark Strong from Transport Initiatives. I'm going to be slightly more pessimistic about the local government agenda and looking at Andrew in particular. With, let's say, just the rise of populism, and not get party political about it, the opportunities for poor actors or bad actors in the strategic authority posts to undermine the actions of their local governments within them is also stronger. So with stronger mayors, you can go in both directions. There is an issue in Cambridge with the strategic road network. I wouldn't expect you to comment on individual things. There's an issue with the regional mayor trying to put what Cambridge is doing in the opposite direction. And that could happen in where I am in Sussex. It could happen in all sorts of other places in the country. So I'd like some thoughts on, it's great to look at Greater Manchester, what positive mayors are doing, but we might conceivably get less positive mayors.
Yeah.
It's therefore incumbent on the people in this room to making sure we've got the, the solid evidence base and giving them the right advice. If you look at the cycle, I mean, we don't yet have mayors in the east, but we've got we've got about sort of 7 or 8 months. Yeah, I guess just giving an example of where we are. Yeah, there's a period now to try to influence the agendas. So I guess incumbent on people within this room to make sure that they're speaking to those mayoral candidates who are very up for speaking to, the wider community to make sure they've got clarity on their manifesto. So there's a bit of an opportunity now to be able to influence that, but then making sure when they are in power, they're getting the professional advice from the likes of us to be able to give clarity, honestly, evidence-based around their priorities going forwards. Yeah, we can't control who will come in, but we can do everything we can to try to influence their strategies and plans going forwards. And I know colleagues in places, for example, the CPCA have done a really good job to make sure that there's that clear advice going forward. So there's, I guess, stages in the cycle, and recognising where we are now, there probably is a bit of an opportunity to make sure we're helping those candidates fully understand the evidence out there before they then develop their manifestos and come in.
Vernon, you've worked for different mayors. Have you got any reflections on that? Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Just quietly get on with everything, and as soon as you give them some ribbons to cut, sorry, Ruth, but
Or a hard hat and high.
a hard hat and a high vis is a cross-party strategy, I'd say.
Yeah.
No, the serious point is that much of what we're all trying to do is actually central to delivering all of the parties' commitments. Some might not like the green stuff as much as some others, and you just have to nuance it a little bit. But you still need decent roads, you still need decent buses, still need a good train service, and I think quietly getting on with it is the answer.
Great advice, thank you. Should we take one more at the back of the room? Is that Colin? I can see. Colin, over to you. Have we got many questions online, Sarah? Yeah, we'll take one question online and then we'll split for a break because otherwise we're going to be behind.
Colin Black, good afternoon. I'm the TPS rep on Development Land Use Planning panel. So I'm keen, as you might imagine, to talk about another game changer, that of vision-led development planning. Particularly the need for new transport assessment guidance. So question to Vernon, can we expect to see some guidelines for Wales and Manchester? To Ruth, could the select committee look into the adequacy of the current approach to transport assessment for new development? And to Andrew, Kent, Oxfordshire, Surrey all now have new TA guidelines. Are you planning to get some in the east?
Thanks, Colin. Could I ask for quick responses to that question?
Well, I think the thing that we are trying to do in Wales and Manchester and pretty much everywhere else I speak to is to measure the benefit of what it is that we're doing in a different way to the way in which we've done it in the past. If you just apply thinking to the profit and loss account of the Transport Authority, you're never going to do anything, frankly. I mean, buses run at a deficit. It needs investment. And I don't think that's a dirty word. That's a really good thing to invest in your bus service. So I hope that the sorts of things that we're doing spatially and from a development perspective across Wales and Greater Manchester is measuring the wider benefits that are delivered by transport that should enable more of those things to be delivered at a faster pace.
Ruth, is this on your radar?
What Vernon said, but the city, what the city lot called? Did the report last week?
Yeah, I know you mean Andrew Carter's.
Yeah.
Centre for Cities.
Centre for Cities report last week showed made the point really strongly about the growth gap between the cities in England and Greater London, and also, but turned that into, if you spent X amount on all of these new bus and light rapid transit routes in some of the English cities, you could turn around the growth in those cities. We've done a little bit of work in terms of Colin's question to me and for my committee. Internally, we're briefing ourselves about the whole issue about assessment. I'm still trying to understand where assessment is, but the more people make the case for growth in GVA, growth in land values, new development opportunities, net zero benefits, etc., and take things away from the old-fashioned way of the benefit cost ratios, but see benefit in a much wider way than just cutting travel times by a few minutes.
Andrew, you talked about delivering 500,000 new homes.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly in terms of Colin's question, obviously there's going to be quite a lot of local authority change is about to unravel in the East. I can't really speak on behalf of those unitaries about to form, but I guess the really interesting conversation will be those mayors getting powers around spatial development strategies in the planning and infrastructure bill. And that work was going to have to start kicking off very soon, but that's a really good way to start to integrate the conversation and the clarity between planning and transport in one place. And I think through that conversation, I think there's a lot of opportunity in places like the East going forward.
Brilliant, thank you. Sarah, one question from online, please.
Just try. What are the biggest challenges you've encountered in developing cross-border services, and how have you overcome these challenges?
Oh, that might be one for you, Vernon, I think.
Well, I suppose the most immediate sort of decisions you have to make are in and around buses and permits for other. Sorry, I don't know why I'm looking at you. So it was this person online that's asked the question, so the permitting, and that's perfectly straightforward. I think the bigger thing, and the penny only started dropping with me after I left London and started working in Manchester, was the enormous potential for connecting rail up and everything else up. And it doesn't mean that you have to pool all the money. It doesn't mean it just means that you get people together that have got common objectives and can make optimal use of the limited resources that we're all working for. So I think the biggest challenges on cross-border connectivity are to come. But I'm really optimistic that, for example, Greater Manchester, Liverpool City Region and North Wales could work with the newly created Mayor of Warrington in Cheshire to complete that economic powerhouse. And it cannot be beyond our wit to be able to talk to each other about how our rail services might adapt to that. And we are seeing GBR starting to change. We are seeing local partnerships starting to form that are different from what's happened in the past in rail. Anyway, we can't claim victory yet, but I'm really optimistic that we can do a lot of things cross-border that we haven't done before, and it's driven by the devolution agenda.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we'll end on an optimistic note, so I'll wrap up this session now. Thank you so much to Ruth, Vernon and Andrew for their brilliant presentations this afternoon. Thanks for engaging in the room online. We are behind schedule. I suggest we come back at 5:45, if that's okay, and we'll get back on track in session 2. Thanks again to all our sponsors who are on the screen there. See you in half an hour. Great. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good break, had a chance for a quick chat and a cup of tea. Before we get on with our second panel of the day, we've got a few announcements to make and a few awards to make, which is very exciting. So we want to start with our Transport Planner of the Year for 2025 and our Young Transport Planner of the Year, which is enormously important awards, and it really helped to shine a spotlight on some great work that's going on around the country. And we had quite a few nominations this year, made it very difficult for the board to really kind of vote on our favourite, because we had some really, really strong candidates. So the first award I'll be presenting tonight is the Transport Planner of the Year award. And the winner is someone who's made an exceptional contribution to the transport planning profession in the last year. And the person that we're giving this award to was nominated for their brilliant work on the Lambeth curbside strategy, if anyone's aware of that document, which aims to repurpose 25% of the borough's curbside, which is currently 94% dominated by car parking, into spaces for people. The winner's leadership and vision have been instrumental in driving this ambitious, equitable and sustainable approach to curbside use. And I'm absolutely delighted to announce that this year's Transport Planner of the Year for 2025 is David Wilson. And unfortunately, David can't be with us here today because he's booked his holiday, which was a bit poor planning for Transport Planning Day. But I believe his colleague Tash is here. Tash, are you? Brilliant, here she is. So Tash, if you could come up and accept the award on David's behalf, that'd be brilliant. The second award this evening is being presented to our Young Transport Planner of the Year. And this goes to a transport planning professional at the beginning of their career, who has likewise made a wonderful contribution to the profession in the last year. And I'm absolutely delighted that our winner today was nominated for his excellent work leading Manchester City Council's 20-mile-an-hour speed limit policy and his award-winning paper on pedestrian wait times, which was presented at this year's annual Transport Practitioners meeting. Some of you may have heard that earlier this summer. So I'm delighted to announce that our winner for this award is Joseph Whitfield from Manchester City Council. And Joseph is here today. So great, we have one more award before we go into our panel, and I'd like to invite our Skills Director, Keith Buchan, up to present this award.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we're making this addition to our annual awards this year to recognise the work of Christine Crossley, who's been our PDS operations manager for just about a decade. Christine, like us, is a transport planner, but she moved into professional development and training, and she's worked for some of the biggest consultancies that are our corporate members today. So I want to mention just a couple of things among her achievements for us. I think, first of all, being a key contributor to the version 3 of the professional development scheme. Now, version 3, version 4, that won't mean much to you, but what it is essentially the starting point for the PDS to become, I think, the more focused and the more modern and effective scheme that it is today. So I think that was a major achievement, and one that she actually completed before she became PDS operations manager. So Christine's been supporting TPS for some considerable time. The other thing I'd just like to mention briefly is her work as the chair of the Employer Trailblazer Committee to create the 2 transport planning apprenticeships, the level 3 and now the degree apprenticeship. Really negotiating what were difficult government requirements and trying to make them compatible with what we were doing in terms of professional qualifications was a really difficult task, and holding the ring, and she's been absolutely brilliant at doing that, as in many other things in her career. So I think those 2 things, the really being in at the beginning of what we're doing today with the PDS, and also having a crucial role in the formation of the apprenticeships, I think are 2 things I'd just like to mention. Well, like everybody that in transport planning that leaves, she hasn't totally left, because she's going to carry on helping us with our initiative on the degree apprenticeship, working closely with Northeastern University. I think we've got 2 of the people teaching on the course attending Transport Planning Day here, so we're very, very glad to see them. So Christine will at least continue to make that contribution to us. I'd just like to say one word about working with Christine, who has that traditional kind of British modest and self-effacing approach. But when she says to you, I may be wrong, but you know that very, very gently she's going to take apart that fabulous idea you had in the shower this morning that's the best thing since sliced bread. But also, better than that, she will give you an idea that's much better than that one and also achieves exactly the objectives that you were seeking. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, Christine, for all your brilliant work. There's some members of the skills team here to celebrate with you. I'd like to ask you to come up, and Nicola will give you a little token of our appreciation.
Brilliant. Right, we'll move straight on to this afternoon's panel discussion. So we have 5 fantastic speakers with us today. First, we have Johnny Anstead, who's the founding director of Town. They're developers dedicated to showing how housing and regeneration can be a force for good. So excited to hear what you have to say, Johnny. We're also joined by Jolie Hill, who is a former Young Transport Planner of the Year herself, and is now an Associate Transport Planner at WSP in London, with over 12 years' experience in both the public and private sectors, including roles at Transport for London and a London borough, a mysterious London borough. Next, we've already met Joseph Whitfield from Manchester City Council, our new Young Transport Planner of the Year, so welcome, Joseph. And then we have Angela Lopez Garces. Gosh. I should have practiced my Spanish accent, shouldn't I? He's the Senior Associate Director of Transport Planning at Jacobs with over 20 years' experience in, is that right? In modelling and appraising major transport schemes. And last but not least, we've got Stephen Holgate, who's Divisional Contracts Manager at Traxis, overseeing commercial contracts across all business units with both clients and suppliers, and will bring great knowledge of data and technology to the conversation. So I'm going to ask each of our panellists just to speak for a couple of minutes about their thoughts on what true transport integration means to them, and how do we know when we've achieved it. And then we'll open it up and we'll have hopefully a nice relaxed conversation. We're hoping that you guys will all join in at that point, so do have some questions ready, and hopefully we'll have time to come to people online as well. So if I can hand over to Johnny to say your opening remarks, that'd be fab.
Gladly. First of all, apologies that I underestimated quite how well dressed transport planners are. I think I got it wrong. As the only developer in the room, I feel I've let the side down a little bit, so apologies for that. Yeah, I just wanted to give a bit of context and a perspective. Really, I'm probably one of the few people in the room who is not a transport planner, and so I've got the privilege of being here talking about something that I don't really know much about or anything really. But there you go. Not for a first time. So the perspective that I've got is that we're a housing developer. We work in lots of more provincial locations, and really we're on the front line in terms of housing delivery, in particular in where most of the housing in the country is being delivered. So not in London, probably not in the main cities, but actually in every kind of suburban situation around the country. And as per the introduction, we've got quite a sort of optimistic and idealistic view of the world, where we think that we can do better places where people are going to live happily, compact, walkable neighbourhoods. We like to reduce parking, take parking off the front drive and into more consolidated parking hubs or car parks, so that we can free up space for people to grow food and kids to play in the streets and stuff. But the reality is that we as developers can't do a lot of that on our own. And the real frustration that I wanted to bring today was that actually we need a backdrop where those kind of bits of optimism and idealism can actually be made to happen. And I guess my reflection is that a lot of that needs to happen way before we get involved, because when we get involved, we have really the tough job of trying to persuade funders, estate agents, customers that actually what we're talking about can be done, and often it feels like an uphill battle. And what's really frustrating sometimes is that when we bring that kind of optimism to the table and say, look, we want to work with 0.75 car parking spaces to a dwelling, the reality of a situation is that if there's not that kind of public transport in place already, forward funded, and there from day one, that even the best intended planners will say to us, look, you know, the situation doesn't allow for you to do 0.75. We want you to do 1.5 to 2.5. And it means that all of the good intention that we have, and I'm not saying that all developers are like this in any way, but when you have a system kind of working against people who want to do something better, clearly there's something wrong. So I suppose that I am here for a conversation about how kind of like we can push in the right direction and how we can set a context through integrated thinking that allows for good practice to be the norm rather than something that you have to really fight hard for.
Brilliant. I think that will probably be music to most people's ears in this room, but let's see. Thank you, Johnny. Jolie, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I think the key thing for me is that integration, it's not a nice to have. This strategy has got to be something that is essential, that we have got to build places that work for everyone, and we need to bake integration in from the start. It can't just be brought in later on. We should be doing this, you know, already. This strategy is much welcomed and we're looking forward to seeing it coming forward. 3 points I really wanted to sort of raise, and they have been brought up already today. Johnny's touched a bit on it as well. First of all, early integration is essential. So why are we still planning housing without transport from day one? We must connect transport policy with housing, with environment, with health, with all of these policies. They can't just be on their own. And we need to have early, meaningful collaboration with especially the vulnerable groups. And that's something I'm really passionate about as well, is women, girls, disabled people, their needs. That's not to mention everybody, by the way, but their needs are often overlooked. And I think that is a really important thing that we need to make sure that comes through in this strategy, that everybody is considered and everybody's considered from the start. My second point is, I think, touching what Johnny said, is that we need to be proactive. We can't be reactive. As a transport planner who's worked in the private sector, the public sector, now back in the private sector, we are, I feel, always brought in too late to the process. So what's stopping us from aligning transport and housing in every local plan right from the beginning? When a planning application comes in, it's too late. Like it's too late, in my opinion. We should have had a say. We should have been brought in from the start. So it still remains too siloed, in my opinion, and we need joined up thinking to embed integration from local plans. My third point that I wanted to raise was touching back on the point I made earlier. We need to design for everyone, not just the default. So we have over half the UK is female. Something I'm really passionate about is trying to get the representation within our industry, but also across industries, within government, within all the areas that need to have that representation should have a fair number of people representing them. And I think the stat I've got here is that it's only a quarter of transport workforce are women. If we're serious about inclusion, decarbonisation, livable cities, we need to really have a think about, are we doing the right things? Things are going in the right direction, without a doubt. There's a lot more females in this room than there definitely would have been a few years ago, but I still think there's a lot of work to be done. And I think that also goes for the data that we have available to us. There's so many data gaps that mean that women, carers, disabled, low-income groups are all just completely invisible. Census data is based on men who are middle-aged white men who go to work, you know, traveling to work. That is something that we really need to get a grasp on from the start, because how can we plan with that data if it's focusing on a minority of the population and we're not even looking outside of that? So how can we be serious about inclusion if our data ignores more than half the population? So in summary, I just wanted to say, I think integration must be baked in from the start, not bolted on from the end. As transport planners, we need to be included because we have the power to enhance all of these other policies, and we shouldn't be siloed. We need to be working together with all of these other departments and policies. And I think integration from the start means better outcomes for everybody.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Jolie. Joseph, over to you.
Hello, everybody. As Nicholas said, my name's Joe Whitfield. I'm an extremely inexperienced sustainable transport strategist and policy officer at Manchester City Council. Before this, I was a UTC engineer at Transport for Greater Manchester for 2 years. And as I said, I'm now at the City Council in policy. As Vernon mentioned earlier, Manchester and Greater Manchester is the fastest growing economy in the country at the moment. But we're also one of the most deprived areas in the entire country. That's Manchester and also our neighbouring local authorities. I believe firmly that transport mobility is social mobility. And so then an integrated transport strategy and an integrated transport network is one which gives equal access and equal opportunity for a wide range or for an entirety of users across a society. At the moment, in our ideal world, the determinant of your commute into Manchester or into work would be your distance as the crow flies. At the moment, the determinant factor is the affluency of your area and the means of transport available to you. And it's not equitable and it's not fair. So yeah, the product of delivering an integrated network is that culture of shared ownership of our public transport infrastructure, which Vernon spoke about earlier, but also our active travel infrastructure and micromobility infrastructure. And it's an environment where all road users can coexist and compromise sympathetically of one another. Anywhere that's currently trying to challenge car dominance, which is pretty much everywhere, including London, will understand the difficulties of that and trying to build in that sympathy and understanding. The way that we brand our policies and the way that we brand our schemes is incredibly essential to creating a sympathetic environment. That being the product, the means of delivering it, at least from my work, I believe is through really, really robust evidence-led network planning, very clearly defined roles and typologies for roads across our network, and it arms transport planners and highways teams with that robust evidence base that means that we can challenge politicians, we can challenge developers, we can challenge our own colleagues in some cases to ensure that the vision that is set is the vision that's delivered. In Manchester and Greater Manchester, we've got a fantastic vision setting document, which is the Streets for All piece. But anyone that's working on that at the moment in Greater Manchester will recognise that there is a big gap between where we are now, our existing guidance documents and our existing political appetite and the vision that is Streets for All. And so our work is to build that evidence base. And you know, even in a very changeable political climate at the moment where evidence seems to be diminishing in its value all the time, I still believe that there is always an amount of evidence that can be presented to someone to change their mind. And we know what the good things to do are. Our job is just to build that evidence base and deliver it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joseph. And you've been doing a great job. So sometimes slightly under the radar of just cracking on and doing things as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm going to take care with how much I talk about the by stealth work that we've done in Greater Manchester. But
the power of doing lots of small things slightly under the radar. Angela, over to you.
Thank you, Nicola, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Integration is a really broad concept, and within transport, it could mean many things. For example, we talk about integration as to refer to multimodal connectivity, ticketing, even funding, and it's also a strong concept in the policy and strategy kind of sphere. But to me, a truly integrated transport system needs to translate into the lived experiences of everyone. And to achieve that, we need more than a policy or a strategy, which is necessary. We need more than resolving all the technical issues and achieving consistent ticketing, for example, which is also necessary. What we need is a massive cultural shift. And this means we need to rethink how we generate ideas about transport, how we prioritize transport investment, and how we deliver transport investment in this country. As we have said before, transport is an enabler, okay, and it should contribute to social justice. And when will we have achieved through integration. So coming back to my idea about the lived experience, I think we would have achieved through integration when no one misses work because the bus didn't turn up and they can't afford a taxi, with there are no children missing school because mom doesn't have the car today and the bus is not reliable, and when grandma can't take herself to a occupational therapy appointment without having to take 2 buses and trek it across the park over under the rain. And basically, when everyone is able to access safe, sustainable, and reliable transport to go about their daily business.
That's great, brilliant, and putting people right at the heart of what we do as transport planners, which I think has been a hugely strong theme through the whole afternoon. Thank you, Angela. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, evening, everyone. And special mention to anybody that tried to get here via the East Coast Main Line today. I suspect you may have used more modes than you expected to. I don't know how integrated it was, but well done for getting here. I know it was a challenge. We at Traxis primarily collect the data that's used in transport assessments, models, and anything else where a decision needs to be made. So we're in a kind of a slightly interesting position in the industry where we're often quite reactive. You guys come to us, say, we want this data collected, we collect it and send it back to you, and away we go. Sometimes we don't even know the purpose, which can have its disadvantages. But at Traxis, what we try to do is to be anticipatory and try and look at the trends and where things are going and try and meet those needs. So definitely in recent years, we've seen an increase in things like school streets and low traffic neighbourhoods and other kind of active travel schemes has definitely been something that's increased in demand, and therefore we've tried to meet those demands in what we can offer. Definitely in my time of doing this, there is a much greater ambition amongst schemes and amongst plans, amongst data collection requirements, scope, scale, duration, depth of analysis are all there. And again, we've tried to meet those and do bigger and better and longer term things. So those are definitely trends that we see in the industry. And I think there are lots of opportunities around using technology to get more and better data and use it in better ways. I think there is a lot more open data sources, and everybody from us as professionals right down to me getting the train down here today had access to so much more data to be able to inform my decision making on whether to go across to Manchester or get a bus or do something to get down here. So I think that's all developments that have come in and moved things along. In terms of challenges, and speaking, I think something Jolie said around, we can only provide data about what is there and not always what isn't there, and gaps in the data, i.e. why is somebody doesn't feel they're able to take a journey and take part in a certain mode, they don't show up in our data. So I think there's a challenge here and possibly some ideas here in the room of how we can kind of solve that. Can we look at more qualitative data as well as quantitative, and can we kind of delve more deeply? But we appreciate that budgets and finances are always constrained, so how do that in the most effective way? And just to echo another thing that Jolie said actually around engagement, as data collection experts, we would always want to be included as early as possible. What's the best way of collecting this data? What is the purpose of your data? Why do you want to do that, collect that data? So we can advise on what added value we can bring to do it safely, to do it hopefully cheaply and quickly, and get those outcomes that we're looking for.
That's brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Really great insights and we've covered a lot of ground there, I think, in a few minutes. We've been talking quite a lot about the Integrated National Transport Strategy this afternoon. We've got a quick fire question for you all just to get you warmed up. What one thing would you like to see in the forthcoming Integrated National Transport Strategy? Where should we start? Johnny, are you happy to kick this off? I know you're not a transport planner, but
yeah, hasn't stopped me before. So from my perspective, I'd like to see a ban on planners and highways engineers not knowing each other. I've literally been in meetings including in unitary authorities where in the meeting that I'm in, the planning team has introduced itself to the highways team and vice versa. And I sort of think, what is going on in a situation where in a unitary, these people don't talk to each other every day? I'd get everyone, I know this is probably a local government issue or probably a mad issue altogether, but I'd get them sitting at the same, opposite each other at desks in the same room and just say, guys, just talk to each other and coordinate a little bit with what you're saying. I don't know if that's national policy.
Wow, that seems
well
like a fairly
spotted, but you
simple
get the idea.
aspiration, doesn't it? I think we should be able to achieve that, surely. Thank you, Johnny. Jolie.
Inclusive design. So the theme of my sort of priorities is about let's make sure that we prioritise those vulnerable groups. So I think we need to have mandated inclusive design in that strategy, because I think there is so many benefits that we can all benefit from if we design for those vulnerable groups and people, and that comes down to basics things like having more ramps and lifts. You know, that can help people that are traveling across London with luggage. That can help people, and I've been there with a pushchair, carrying my son in a pushchair down some stairs at a station, nobody helping me because there's no lift. Like, there's so many benefits that we can get from prioritising these vulnerable groups. So I think inclusive design is something that I'd like to see in that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jolie. Joseph?
I'm gutted because Jolie nicked my answer. With my UTC background, I really wanted to talk about that because we've done quite a lot of work on accessibility and inclusivity at side roads in Manchester, which is a piece that some people may be familiar with. I guess a second answer, which I expect will be popular in the room as well, is anything to help us rationalise pavement parking. And the way that it's endemic across Manchester and Greater Manchester. I'm not old enough to have travelled further than that very much, but I expect it's the same across the country. And we've been waiting for a very long time, or so my colleagues tell me, for something that gives us in local authorities the tools to react to this and respond to it. And we need it from national government, and this is as good an opportunity as any for that to come.
Yeah, great shout. I like that one. Thank you. Angela.
So I think the answer for me would be, I would expect that the integrated national transport strategy articulates a vision of how transport systems need to change in order to achieve the growth ambitions for this country. But then growth is only growth if it's sustainable and inclusive. And from that point of view, I would like the transport strategy to acknowledge two fundamental truths. One is that the transport systems as they are today serve some better than others. And second is that transport investment has benefited some demographics better than others. So once we acknowledge that, we need to envision what are the type of choices we want everyone to be making in future, and we need to set clear pathways to ensure those choices are available to absolutely every single one of us. And that would mean tackling imbalances, that would mean eradicating transport-related social exclusion or transport poverty, etc.
Fantastic. So you're really hoping to see social inclusion, social equity right at the heart of the new strategy.
Yes.
Fantastic. Stephen.
I think appropriate priority to active and sustainable modes, but I think there needs to be some sort of narrative on the benefits for everyone. I may just spend too much time reading news articles about my hometown of York, about the war on the motorists and all these things. And the two don't have to be mutually exclusive or at odds with each other. More people walk and cycle, more people get on the bus. That means there's less congestion. That means blue badge holders and other people can access the city centre a lot more easily. And I feel that sometimes the narrative is lost in trying to get those points across, that it's not a case of winners and losers. It's better for everybody. Again, drivers stuck in traffic jams with bad air quality. If there's fewer cars on the road, better air quality, fewer jams. That's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. And it's good for those that still do the modal switch and get the active travel.
So yeah, so a more compelling story about the benefits of investing in sustainable transport. Yeah, great. Okay, all great answers. Thank you, everyone. I might be channeling Colin Black slightly here, but we've been talking a lot about housing as well this afternoon, and obviously delivering a lot of new housing at pace is a major priority for, well, I think both for central government and for local authorities as well. What do you think good looks like from an integrated transport perspective as we roll out housing in a more sustainable and inclusive way? Johnny, I think I have to come to you first for this one, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. what do I think good looks like? I think it's probably a case of infrastructure being developed ahead of time. You mentioned it. I think we've got to start allying housing and infrastructure provision, because at the moment what we end up having often is everybody sort of saying we want to bring some housing forward, but there's no public transport. So, you know, there's a limit on how bold we can be about certain things in the housing. And you sort of, and everyone's sort of like looking to each other saying, whose job is it anyway to put in the public transport? Who has to fund it? And the reality is that most developers are bringing forward developments that in and of themselves don't really support huge funding interventions. And it needs to be sort of government-led, the kind of oversight. It needs to be plan-led, it needs to be in spatial planning policies. But spatial planning policies without funding teeth to go alongside them don't really amount to anything, because, you know, we know that the things that really matter cost a lot of money. So, so I think what good looks like is to have a unified approach to funding between housing, so Homes England funding and Transport DOT kind of funding should be allied and joined at the hip, really, in terms of creating the context where then developers can sort of do their bit and plug and play, but with a context that's just well resourced and has got appropriate infrastructure. And then with that context, you can then be really quite demanding of developers and say, look, you know, we've done our bit. Now we want you to do your bit, which is better public realm, you know, decreased parking, you know, use our public transport, and create better places. And I just think that would be that would be for me what good would look like.
That's great. I mean, some of that sounds quite time consuming as well, because plans are never quick to produce. If you've got any thoughts about what you might do, you know, in terms of quicker wins, where should we start if we're trying to get this housing rolled out really quickly?
Well, I think we need to take we probably need to accept that if we want to do some good stuff more quickly, we're going to need to cut a few of those corners and to test out what works. And I think there's a lot of paralysis in the system, isn't there? Or a lot of caution and risk aversion in the system, where it's like, oh, you know, if we haven't got the perfect data, then we can't do a thing. Whereas the reality, none of it really is perfect, and we need to get a little bit more experimental. I think if we want to try some things out, then I think from sort of, you know, what would happen if we didn't quite have the capacity in the network? Will the world end, or will sort of things move around and kind of, you know, normalize, and people will find different ways? So I sort of think at that top level, there's a kind of maybe slightly more risk prone or risk open attitude would be good. So we can actually test some different models and see what works, because frankly, the current model doesn't work perfectly. So it's a good, you know, we've got new towns coming around the corner. If we don't innovate and try things out, then how are we going to know what works well? I think that all goes all the way down to more the stuff that sounds like the things that Joseph is leading on in Manchester, although we don't talk about that by the sound of things. But, you know, just try things out. I had a conversation with somebody about zebra crossings, and in this country we can only deliver zebra crossings apparently around like 20 or 30 grand a piece. To my mind, it's just some paint on a road. Why aren't we trying that out to see, you know, what would happen if we just do these good things for a little bit more cheap, and let's see if they work or not. Let's just try stuff out.
Brilliant, thank you. Jolie, you've worked in London for quite a while. Any observations on how we deliver growth at pace?
Yeah, I think good transport planning for me is all about co-designing with the communities and the people that are in those areas. Those are the people that know their area way better than we do as transport planners coming in, either from a public or private perspective. And I think it's really, really important that we don't just include them in some, you know, part of the process, but we have them on board from day one. We get them involved in the conversations. We don't just consult with them. We engage them. We get their views on board, and we listen to them and take their feedback from the start and build that in to the new communities. And I think that's not only will help them build the trust, it then helps to tailor the solutions, looking at the problems that are in their particular areas, because we all know that no two sites or areas are the same. So they all need their own bespoke approaches. And I think by having a voice from somebody who's already living in that area or working in that area, that's how we can really understand then what needs to be fed into that area. So I think that's something that's would really make good transport planning. And what does make good transport planning, I think, apart from, places that are maybe not designed so well, is maybe because the communities themselves have not been involved in the right times.
That's great. Thank you, Jolie. Any observations from how Manchester's tackling the challenge of rapid growth?
Yeah, so Manchester is growing at just an unbelievable rate in terms of the amount of city centre housing that's gone up, and also in the surrounding area. In 1995, 400 people lived in Manchester city centre, and it's now several 100,000 just 30 or so years later. And in the absence of clear sort of sustainable transport strategy in the city centre in particular, housing developments have been delivered which are very impermeable to the public, impermeable to active modes, and they haven't been designed to facilitate a wider network because there wasn't a wider network plan at the time. And it leads to a lot of wasted Section 106 money, which in a local authority is absolute gold dust, and we need to make the most of it. So in terms of working with development, what we've been doing, and we've got a recent success story that I can speak about, is having that incredibly clear and concise network plan, which you can communicate to developers and show to them the benefits of creating a space which might, if it interacts with your cycling network, has a lovely, fantastic suds covered and wonderful cycle track through it. Or if they're building something in a core walking zone, you can communicate that to them and appropriate provision can be built. And, not all developers are as lovely and forward-thinking as Johnny, and we've had quite a lot of battles in Manchester. We've recently won one where someone was trying to build a large student development that sat directly on top of an existing and incredibly well-used cycle lane, and they were going to tear it out and direct people around a ridiculous sort of 300-metre detour. And we won that battle by having a really clear network plan, being able to show them the developments, the benefits, and trying to create a partnership. And it's that feeling of partnership which Johnny's talking about, which it's important, if the developers don't have it already, that we can show them a vision and we can make them engage with that and see the benefits of creating permeable, active, and coherent and cohesive neighbourhoods.
That's great, thank you. I'm going to move us on slightly. Angela, you talked quite a lot about how we engage communities and people from diverse backgrounds. Could you talk a bit more about that? Obviously, we've touched on kind of polarisation of debate quite a bit this afternoon. How do we actually take people with us on this journey towards a more integrated network and communities?
I think the first step would be to recognise that the diversity that there are in terms of transport needs and try to deliver a transport system that responds to that. So I think public participation, for example, is key to this. We have a really good example with the Integrated National Transport Strategy that is built in a huge consultation exercise, engaging more than 6,000 responses. We need to build on that. And how do we do it? Could we look at online democracy, for example? We need to, I think, get creative on this area. Could we use AI to make sure that underrepresented voices are included? And also, could there be a way in which we can bring a new public buy-in? For example, any one of us could be investing on a shared mobility that is inclusive, that is sustainable, rather than buying another car, for example. So I think these are all things that we need to be looking at in future to engage the communities. Basically, we need a public transport that people feel belongs to them and bringing them along in this journey. And the Integrated National Transport Strategy is a perfect opportunity to do that. The second thing I would like to mention is that it's not only about the communities, it's also about businesses. And the word partnership has been mentioned a few times. So I think we need to articulate the value of inclusive transport and explain this back to businesses. In my opinion, if transport is truly accessible for everyone, the return on investment will be greater as well. Everyone wants to reach their clients. They want a workforce that can access their workplaces. And it is very, very important that we achieve a transport system that can be used by everyone.
Brilliant, thank you. Stephen, do you want to pick up that question maybe a bit more from a data perspective, but how we...
Yeah, I mean, I
use
think
that
it's
to
kind of
engage?
everything Angela said, and then kind of what I touched on at the beginning, it's that qualitative as well as quantitative data, and can we go deeper and engage with groups and with representation. I think there's literally thousands there's professional bodies like ourselves, there's charities, there's just local residents groups are pretty good these days at getting together and discussing and campaigning for certain areas. And we've talked about devolution and local solutions for local people, local solutions been kind of unique. So I think, yeah, just essentially everything Angela said about that engagement. And yeah, I think from my perspective, it's not just saying there were 50 people in this area or something like that. It's getting that deeper, and often that is about going and asking them. There's no way I can stick up a camera or put a sensor anywhere and know the purpose of your trip or all these things, but there are ways, large data sets, or just going asking people that we can get that data and understand a bit more deeply the purpose, and then hopefully we can change people's minds, have that evidence to change some of the restrictions and kind of planning and things.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to open it up to our audience now for questions. Sarah, I don't know how many we had online. Okay, so let's open it up to the room then. Who's got a question for our panel? Yes, chat there in the middle. We've got...
Hi, my name is Marco. I'm a student at University of Brighton. I would say this question is best for Joseph, since you're working on City Council, but anyone can chime in. So I live in Brighton, and one of the sort of key issues that I find is that the quality of the roads is quite abysmal. That it's filled with potholes. There's, I think it's a danger to a lot of vehicles. I think it causes a lot of damage, and especially from an integration perspective, I think it's a little bit absurd to be providing such massive investment for electric buses without providing sort of adequate roads for them to travel on. So I was just wondering what departments you find sort of should be responsible for that, and what sort of on roadblocks there are for that being sort of
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. I'm glad to say that I don't work in highway maintenance.
It's an important disclaimer. You should have put that right at the start.
But I massively recognise the concerns that are raised. I grew up in a very rural area where potholes were a feature of the village. They weren't something that happened and became repaired. They were there for as long as I was. I guess from my perspective, issues of road maintenance, in your local council, there will be a budget allocated annually that will never be enough to fix everything when it comes up. When we're talking to some of our colleagues in road maintenance, a lot of what we want to build, if it's a cycle lane or a side road treatment that's a bit more, transformative, everything that you deliver with capital funding has a maintenance implication. And sort of the traditional argument is that the easiest thing and the cheapest thing is bitmac and tarmac, and let's make everything made out of that. But clearly that isn't working. Clearly we're still having a shortfall in our maintenance of tarmac. And so an argument that we're talking about now is when you're building cycle lanes, even if it's just with bolt downs, or when you're doing side road treatments that build out the footway, that it frees up maintenance budgets. If you've got a carriageway that's 15 meters wide and all 15 meters are used by cars presently, and you narrow that to be, 8 meters of cars and 3.5 for cyclists either side, which would be a really, really, really ridiculous design. Then actually you've halved the burden of maintenance of tarmac on that road, and suddenly you've freed up a lot of budget. So this is very much into sort of the nitty-gritty of conversations with highway maintenance. But from my sustainable transport perspective, we can use the classic maintenance argument, flip it on its head, and say, actually, if maintenance of new assets is a problem, then let's build ones that are cycled on and walked on and not driven on.
Great, I love that. I mean, obviously looking after the infrastructure we've already got needs to be prioritised as much as building the new stuff. So I think it is a really important question, and one that we shouldn't kind of overlook as transport planners. Right, who else wants to ask a question? Yes, lady at the front here.
I am Rachel Rombo from RGP Transport Planning. It's a question primarily for Johnny, but others might want to chime in. So obviously transport planning as a profession is heading towards vision-led, and we all know kind of like what that vision, what we want it to be, but it's demonstrating without the evidence, because we haven't yet built it, to the public and to the councillors, the planning departments, kind of how much vision and aspiration can we put forward versus how much is going to be thrown off the table as being a dream, really. And linked to that, do we need to, as a profession, integrate more with kind of marketing communications strategies? How do we get our messages across in the most effective way?
Great question. Johnny, are you willing to take that one on? Yeah.
Is it vision led, as in is it the change from being sort of yeah, right. Which is great, right? That's, for us, it's that's a huge, seems like a huge thing. And I suppose I can see the challenges that probably puts you in the same kind of camp that I described at the beginning a bit, which is like having to kind of persuade people that vision is great, but have you addressed the downside risks adequately? And I suppose that comes to the point that I made, which is with a lot of the risks that we're talking about, what's the worst that can happen? And can we sort of get better at judging the risk versus the benefit? Because the benefit of what we're talking about is huge, like in terms of public health, childhoods, freedom and independence, social mobility, the reconnecting people who are isolated at the moment. The upsides are huge. If the downsides are a bit of inconvenience while things teethe, can we sort of make that sale? I suppose it comes to your question of how do we communicate all of that in a way that doesn't sound either naive or unpalatable, or that won't get seized on by people who just want to make trouble and sort of will. And we've sort of seen with 15-minute neighborhoods and so on. There's just, you know, these things are all can be quite easy pickings for people who just want to cause trouble, really. But I think there is some marketing and trying to kind of curate better arguments about all of this stuff to try and be a bit more analytical and not just vision without kind of real thought. I also think there's something that it struck me that Stephen mentioned earlier, which is around data that isn't there. And I suppose talking to a similar point to what Jolie said earlier, which is the data that isn't there is kind of as important or more important than the data that is there, because in all the data of travel that's occurring, it's like who isn't traveling, who are the invisible people who aren't taking movement at the moment, and can we get better at kind of not just looking at the data that is there, which is probably, as you say, middle-aged men traveling back and forward, and therefore the world will always be built for middle-aged men traveling back and forward. We need to get much cleverer at looking beneath the data and saying, well, you know, what's this really telling us? And I suppose that's not just a marketing piece, that's also a real kind of profound intelligence piece that the sector, I think, as a whole, just needs to be better at kind of thinking in the way that lots of other sectors, but the built environment tends not to, which is kind of what's beyond the immediate data, and how do we marshal that kind of the vision, the marketing communications, but also the underpinning data to kind of make a much better argument. So I don't think it's one or the other of any of those things. I think it's got to be backed up by all three strands.
And I think I would add, like, actually talking to people about what their vision is for their local area. And when you actually ask big open questions like that, you're often quite surprised and pleasantly surprised about the answers you get back. Jolie, I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, I would like to comment actually. I was going to say that. I think for me, the key thing that we are coming up against with vision-led planning is people outside of transport planning, town planning, don't know what we're talking about. They don't even know what vision-led planning is, or they don't know what it means. They don't know what we're trying to achieve. And I think that is partly because we need it to come from the top. We need bold leadership. We need them to be educated in what we are trying to achieve. We need them to be able to show what the outcomes will be from this, that we're not just trying to do something that's new. We're trying to do something that's right for everybody. And I think if we haven't got that direction from the top about vision-led planning is needed, then how is it going to filter down? For example, we have been waiting a long time for the DfT's new TA guidance document, which we're still waiting for. And there are, we touched upon it earlier already, there are some councils that have already released their own vision-led guidance. Everybody's doing something different. Nobody seems to be doing quite the same thing. I know when I was at TfL, we were working on a new guidance document there as well. And that will hopefully be coming out shortly. But I think there is, without that bold leadership from the top and the direction from the top about a consistent approach, that we're all educated in exactly what we're trying to do, I don't think we're going to get that vision-led planning without that. So I think we need to keep shouting about what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, educating people and getting that message across, and just keep talking about it and getting it out there, because it's not, I don't think it's transport planners we need to convince, I think it's everybody else.
Brilliant, thank you, Jolie. Does anyone else on the panel want to comment on that question? No? Okay, good. Probably got time for one more question. Yes, is that Joe? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jo Ward. I'm Head of Transport at Oldham Council. I'm going to pick up on a couple of things that you've mentioned already and take it back to the people stuff, because that's what we're here to talk about, I think, today. So the thing that keeps me working in the area that I work in and has kept me here for nearly 30 years is the equity thing. I think it's a social justice issue. So I'm just interested in what the panel think, you know, what their views are and why they do what they do and what keeps them getting out of bed in the morning to keep doing this.
Brilliant question. Okay. We'll maybe start at the other end of the panel. Sorry.
I think it kind of goes back to what Ruth was saying earlier around how it affects everything. I mean, transport is health, transport is economics, transport is trade, it's everything. And I think the benefits are great for me as an individual, but also family, friends, industry, business people. And I think, yeah, that's kind of the crux of it for me, really.
Angela, what gets out of you out of bed in the morning to come to work?
Very similar. Transport, obviously, it permeates through all geographies, all territories, all aspects of life. It's just basically the potential of transport to transform lives and to have a positive impact in people's lives is unbelievable. And this is always something that I have really appreciated about our profession. And also what keeps me going is to see change. I have been working in transport for over 20 years, and I have seen that some things never change, but others are starting to change. And it's very promising developments in inclusion, developments in gender, developments in inclusivity. I think this is really, really positive, and I think there is more and more to come. So yeah, really excited.
Brilliant, thank you, Angela. Joseph, you're still quite new in your career. Would you
Yeah,
a bit from you?
Yeah, so I sort of ended up in transport by accident, really.
You're not the only one.
No, I'm told it's most of us. I grew up in a little village in the Peak District called Bonsall, and I was served by one bus a day on weekdays. You can't cycle because it's the peaks, or at least not unless you're doing it for exercise. And I'd have to walk over moors to get to the next village. So when I moved to Manchester to study, I was sort of like, I could not believe the state of it. I lived in Fallowfield. Apologies if you don't know Manchester's geography, but I lived in Fallowfield, which is served by the busiest bus route in Europe. I then moved from there to Whittington and was able to cycle up the Oxford Road corridor. And for 3 years of studying, I felt like I was living in this transport paradise. I used my degree to become a UTC engineer at Transport for Greater Manchester and spent the next 2 years travelling all around GM and realised that what I'd known of Manchester's transport was a tiny little pocket of immense affluence and real good fortune, and that actually, as I was travelling to Lee and to Atherton, to Oldham, to Rochdale, to Stockport, to Marple, the lack of equity that you mentioned, Joe, is just endemic, and it's not just about transport mobility, it's about transport safety, and it's about the way that translates into opportunities. You know, I live in Chorlton now, and I'm very lucky to, and I can choose from 3 different modes that will take me 20 minutes to cover 4 or 5 miles. If you go 4 or 5 miles out of the city centre in the other direction, I might have a tram or I might have a bus, and I certainly can't cycle and I certainly can't walk. So that's why I'm doing what I do now.
Great, thank you, Joseph. Very compelling. Jolie, I think, was it you who posted on LinkedIn that somebody said to you, transport planning doesn't sound very sexy? What was your counter argument?
I am clearly very passionate about wanting to see changes. I really want to see us moving in the right direction in terms of gender responsive in planning. That's one of my passions. But in answer to your question, I just, first of all, couldn't believe someone actually said that to me. But secondly, I think the key thing for me and how I got into transport planning, I did my first degree in town planning, and then I found my passion in transport planning through that. And I think it was because I just thought we are all using transport systems day to day to get around, and how important is it that we can then influence those, we can build on those what's already out there, but we can also then share good practice, and we can contribute to all of these other amazing things that are going on. You know, we went to a really interesting talk last week, organised by Rob at Arup, about health, and how as transport planners we have such an important role to play in health. That's not the only thing, obviously. We have an important role to play in many other things: housing, environment, all sorts of areas. So I think what I really find interesting and I'm really passionate about is that we can all collectively, working together with town planners, working together with economists, working together with you know, health ministers and people in all sorts of different departments, we can all help to make a difference. And I think transport, personally for me, is the core of that. And I think that's something that, yeah, has kept me in this job from day one, really. So
fabulous, thank you. And Johnny, what motivates you to do what you do?
I do struggle getting out of bed sometimes in the morning, James. My main answer, but so I'm not a transport planner, but the challenges are the same, and I think that it's really hard to sort of keep sight of it, isn't it? You sort of you know, because every day feels like you're in a struggle, and you're sort of like, this is really, really hard, and all we want to do is something decent and for it to go quite smoothly. Why does that never happen? And I think that you can see why things get bogged down and the business as usual sort of takes precedence, because the path of least resistance is a very powerful attraction sometimes. I sometimes try and remind the team at town that we're not just building we're not just getting planning, we're not just building houses, we're actually, you know, the privilege of being able to put a roof over somebody's head is amazing. You're in one of the very, very unusual sectors where you're dealing with the most profound basic needs of people. And if you sort of forget the bricks and mortar aspect and go, what we're building is shelter, health and well-being, the opportunity to bring up your child in a safe and supportive environment, the opportunity to know your neighbours and to grow old in a way that you have their support around you. That seems to me to bring it all to life, and it's just interesting and frankly encouraging and quite inspiring to hear the rest of the panelists sort of talk not really about transport, but to see it as a means to an end, that actually you're talking about many of the same things. You're talking about the ability to get people to economic activity, to culture, to their friends, to schools, to all the things that actually make life. And I think that hearing that from your sector is a really powerful takeaway for me. And I think that's the main thing. It's not the what we do, it's the why we do it. That's the really important thing for us all, I think.
Amazing. I think that's the perfect note to end the evening on. So thank you for that question, Joe, and thank you all for your brilliant answers. So yeah, if we could say thank you to our panel, that'd be amazing. Just a few thanks just to finish off the evening. Thanks again to all of our sponsors who are there on the slide. We couldn't have done it without you. You've all been brilliant. We'll be looking for sponsors for next year's event. So if you've been inspired today and would like to support next year's event, come and have a chat with us. Wanted to thank JFG Communications as well, who've been brilliant in getting us all organised today. So thank you for your support through the year, and to our brilliant TPS board who do so much hard work behind the scenes to keep the activities going across the society, and to our whole network of volunteers who do work across the regions and on our policy panel and a variety of other activities. And thank you all to you for coming along today, and for those of you who joined online as well. It's been brilliant. It feels like this is busier than ever, so shows that there's real appetite to come together and talk about these issues. We've got time now, hopefully, to stay and network, so I hope you can join us all downstairs for a drink and something to eat and a chat. And thank you, everyone. Have a safe journey home.